I'm Michael Gelb. I work with companies around the world on creativity, innovation, both in terms of teaching the particular skills that individuals need, but also how to create an organizational context and culture that is conducive to creativity and innovation.
How can you think on your feet?
Yes. Well, it's a wonderful expression we say, right? Think on your feet. So I guess that means you don't have time to sit down and think about it, right? You're there and it's happening. But it's also gives us a clue to what I think would be very helpful for people in a very practical way. It's to make sure that you're balanced literally on your feet. It's to make sure that you're poised, that you keep breathing. Because what happens when you have to do something creative with a very short deadline or immediately or spontaneously is many people stop breathing and they interfere with their breathing. They go into a modified form of the startle pattern. They go into fight, flight, and then they're more likely to respond from fear because it's a fear pattern and it's hardwired into our system. And it's what happens is when we're afraid, when we're startled, Frank Pierce Jones at Tufts University studied this extensively. He said that what happens is people, they blink their eyes, they hold their breath, they retroflex the head, they raise the shoulders. It's to prevent from being, you falling out of a tree or somebody's hitting you, or it's getting ready to run away. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, not the biochemicals that are associated with big picture, insight, creativity. So you're more likely to make a defensive response. Unless you have some kind of practice that trains you in that challenging moment to expand, to exhale, to smile, to keep your eyes soft. Keep if you can, have your weight evenly distributed, upright spine. So I've developed lots of practice for people, lots of ways of helping people do this. The Alexander technique is one of the simplest, most elegant and profound. There's a reason they teach it at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and at the Juilliard School in New York and all over the world at performance training academies, both for actors and musicians, because it is really the art of stage presence. So the Alexander technique is one modality. The other one that I have studied extensively and teach around the world, I used to just teach Aikido, and now I teach Taiji and Qigong as well, both the Japanese and the Chinese traditions. It's actually fun. I teach Taiji and Qigong to Aikidoists, and I teach Aikido to Taiji and Qigong people, and then I teach both of them to yoga practitioners. I don't teach yoga.
So what is the Alexander technique?
So Alexander was a Shakespearean actor in Australia, Tasmania, and this is in the 1890s, and he discovered that in the middle of performances he would lose his voice, and it kept getting worse, and he went to all the doctors and speech coaches and therapists, and nobody could help him. Other people would have quit, but he turned out to be a genius, and he said, no, there must be something I'm doing that's causing the problem. And he eventually realized, they didn't have video back then, so he set up a system of mirrors. And he watched himself in the mirror, and he noticed that as soon as he even thought about speaking, and he used to do Shakespeare, so he would think, to be or not to be. As soon as he even thought about it, he noticed the tendency to pull his head back, to retroflex, to go into the startle pattern that Frank Pierce Jones would discover many years later. So he said, well, that must be the cause of my problem, so I'll just stop. But he found that he couldn't. It was such a deeply ingrained habit. So he had to come up with a way to outwit his own habit. And that way is the Alexander technique, which he then started teaching it to other people because he became famous for the power of his stage presence, people began to come to him for lessons, including a group of doctors who had an amateur theatrical company. And the doctors got the idea this could help many of our patients, and it did help them. So in 1904, they helped to sponsor Alexander to go to London to teach his work to a wider world community. He became known as the protector of the London theater. And after trying to explain this to people, he started working with his hands to help them get the physical experience of easing out of startle and easing into poise. You know, like if you look at a Maasai tribes person, if you look at a baby, if you look at Roger Federer playing tennis, LeBron James or Steph Curry, anybody who's at the top level of anything, they move, their spine lengthens as they move. They make it look easy. So the Alexander technique, in simple terms, it's the art of making it look easy when it isn't, which is what you need when you juggle, when you do martial arts, when you're leading a business meeting, when you're dealing with a conflict situation at work or at home.
Perhaps you could show me how this Alexander technique could be applied, or to how to juggle, so that we would see that.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
If you give, most people, you give them one ball and they don't have much of a problem with it. But as soon as they get two, they go like this. Because they think it's going to be hard. Right? And you give them three and they fall apart. So what I teach them to do, first of all, I have them practice one ball and make sure that they can keep breathing. And keep smiling, keep their eyes soft. Then we try two, but what I figured out many years ago is people, they just can't keep their poise when they think they have to catch two balls. As soon as you give them two, they go like this. So I could, what the technique really looks like, if I may, is just stay where you are. Is just giving a gentle sense that, yeah, that's it. There's a little bit more freedom possible here, so that if you just let your nose a little bit, so that's it, so that there's just a little more freedom at this top joint. So it all starts with allowing just that little bit more freedom there, because the first, did you notice anything? Does that?
Yeah, at first I forgot to breathe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, breathing, that was something to do. And it feels a bit lighter.
Just a little bit lighter, right? Yeah. Just, so I always ask people, what could be just a little bit lighter? Like if I'm like this, what could be a little lighter? Now that makes all the difference in my ability to respond to a spontaneous, challenging situation. This is one world of response, and a little bit lighter, I'll lighten up. I'll be more poised. I'll be able to breathe. I'll have more oxygen in my brain, so I'll probably be smarter. So coming back to the juggling metaphor, what I figured out is even if I came and helped people, like I just gave you a tiny little touch, as soon as, just as what Alexander discovered, as soon as he started speaking again, he went back into the old pattern. And as soon as people have two balls and they think they have to catch them, the startle pattern comes back in. So what I developed was a method where I had people throw the balls and drop them. Don't even try to catch them. Don't even think about catching them. And then, because I do this a lot of time in teams with organizations, we have somebody pick the balls up for you. So we model servant leadership together. We look after each other, and people are picking the balls up for one another. So then they really get that they can focus on the throw and not worry about the catch. And then that gives them enough space that they can remember their own poise. So then I have them throw two and just catch the first one. Then throw two and catch them both. And so sometimes the startle pattern comes back, but we go back to letting them drop. And then here's what the coolest thing that happens is they go like this. Sometimes they throw them, And they just land in their hands and they go, oh my God, it's like an enlightenment experience for them. Then we make the task more complex. Now you're going to do 3. The thought of 3 for a lot of people, So again, we get them to, first it starts with actually having a little smile, like the Buddha or the Mona Lisa makes all the difference. Changes your physiology, and it also uplifts the people around you. So we get them, I coach them to have a Buddha or a Mona Lisa smile, to make sure they keep breathing, to lengthen the spine, and then I have them throw 3 balls and let them drop, and now I have a group of 3, so 2 people are picking up the balls. So it's, you know, I started doing this many, many years ago when everybody was very stiff and wore a tie in every business situation and didn't laugh. And you get people doing this, and the ties would be loosened, the people would be laughing, and now people love it even more. And what happens is we then have them throw all 3 and catch 1. Then throw 3 and catch 2. Then throw 3, and if you let the 3rd one land in your hand, you just juggled for the first time. And I have these rooms full of, I've done this with IBM engineers, 1,000 IBM engineers in a big hotel ballroom, and you hear them go, wow! And then of course, I tell them if you want to keep juggling, you have to keep throwing the balls, which means they'll keep dropping. So you know, you have these great people who have been here at the forum, like Ed Catmull and Vinton Cerf, and I'm sure that if you've interviewed them, they talked about you have to create an environment where there's psychological safety for making mistakes. So I use juggling as a metaphor for that, but also to integrate with the Alexander technique, the psychophysiology of being free from the fear pattern, and emotions and your physical embodiment state is contagious in a team, for better or for worse. If I'm the boss and I walk into the meeting like this, everybody's on the defensive. There will be no creativity. If I'm the boss and I walk in with smile and I ask questions and I listen and I'm lighthearted, there's going to be a lot more creativity. So you know, that's an aspect of leading creativity that's very subtle. Just your actual presence will either inspire it or shut it down, and you might not be aware of that at all.
Avoid trying to do thousands of things that doesn't work. We have 274 templates for your business success. Reach your ambitious goals with one-on-one sprint coach. We double your revenue in 90 days.